Namaste. This is our 50th episode of the Bharat Varta podcast, and along with my co-host Ashish, I am delighted to welcome Honorable Minister for Textiles and Women and Child Development, Srimati Smriti Irani ji. Thank you so much for making the time, ma'am, from your busy schedule and gracing us with presence.
Thank you for inviting me.
Right. So I'm going to hand things over to Ashish to get started.
Yeah, thanks, Carrie. Smriti ji, let's talk about the textiles part, which has been in the news in the last few months. When the pandemic hit us, India was not ready to produce any PPE kits or even masks in some cases. But 6 months down the line, we have become a potential exporter of PPE kits. I know you have spoken about this in the media, but it will be great to recap this journey of what transformed in the last 6 months and how did the government help this process?
So I think that it'll be prudent to take and turn the clock back to the month of February. The Prime Minister had a keen watch on the developments with regards to COVID the world over. And we tracked the explosion of the pandemic in the European Union, and especially the pressure on the medical community with regards to safety measures, which included safe clothing and PPE suits. In our 74 years of history, we had never needed more than 50,000 PPE suits in a year. And all of it was imported. So we did not have any manufacturing capacities in our country. Now, on the 27th of February, the WHO came out with the standards which need to be met by manufacturers of PPE. And in the first week of March, we realized that the standard was a level 4 for doctors who were treating COVID patients. These are technologies that need at least 30 to 40 weeks in terms of from baseline preparations onwards to full-fledged manufacturing. That is a timeline that we had seen internationally. I think that also the challenge was that international borders started getting sealed. So we as a country, A, did not have any manufacturing capacity, B, the prerequisites for the manufacturing, which was the machinery, was not made in India at all. Additionally, the challenge was that though we had capacity to make the raw material for it, which was the base fabric, the sealing between the two ends of the fabric, which is a sealing machine, was not available in India. And the first week of March, we all congregated in the ministry. We had support from the Ministry of Health. We sought support from Ministry of External Affairs and Commerce. And we reached out to states where we know that our industry had potential fabric manufacturing opportunities. You'd be surprised that we had a segregated supply chain, which is actually the story of the Indian textile business. And we were fortunate enough that we could pick each and every district of the country where segregated parts of the supply chain lay. If you remember, the announcement of the lockdown, in fact, brought forth a challenge that in a state where nothing is functional, no manufacturing capacity is open, how do you start a whole new segment of an industry? So there were times when we were calling factory floors, getting them open in collaboration with district and state administration. We were running samples from Punjab, from Phagwara, all the way down to Coimbatore, or all the way from Bengal to Coimbatore. We were ringing in our colleagues in the railway ministry. We were ringing in our colleagues in aviation sector, and this was a collaborative effort. Now, there is an assumption that for a new industry to grow, government has to give a huge subsidy to support the industry. I'm proud to say this is the only industry which has grown from 0 to 1100 plus companies today. In just 3 months, we grew that number without a single rupee of subsidy given, which means all the industry needed was the government to support them with regards to machinery, with regards to compliances and testing facilities. We actually had companies fly in collaboration with the MEA machine needs for their manufacturing processes. And I think ultimately today, N95 masks, till September, the industry in India has produced over 22 crore masks, and our per day production capacity is now 26 lakhs N95 masks. A country which produced nothing as of March, today has become the second largest manufacturers of PPE suits in the world. And we are also now exporting.
Great. You mentioned about the certification aspect. If I remember correctly, there was only one lab which could certify, right? And I think government also ramped that up.
Only lab that could certify. We got in touch with Defense Ministry. We requested DRDO, and we actually had the Ordnance Factory Labs also turned around to service this aspect of certification. And I'm happy in 15 days, India went from 1 labs to 8 to 9 labs immediately. I think, Ashish, that this is one of the greatest examples of how Modi Sarkar works with a spirit of collaboration. And when the Prime Minister speaks of cooperative federalism, there is this shining example in terms of industrial growth and capacities, which can be, in fact, one of the defining elements of how cooperative federalism is helping not only the country, but becomes a hallmark internationally for manufacturing processes.
Right. You alluded to the textile industry being one of the key drivers of the economy, and the fact that it has really not needed a lot of government support, but it's also a big market where we can.
This is the only example where the industry had a challenge before it and a consumption which is unfortunate, because nobody would wish a pandemic on its own country or the world. So, but the industry rose to the challenge irrespective of lockdown, and we did not spend a single rupee of subsidy, is my contention. Why I'm correcting you is because there are many elements within the industry that does need support, especially for technology upgradation, where the government has actually put in over 17,000 crores of rupees over a period of 6 years only for technology upgradation for the industry.
Right. So, Mama, how do we increase the export levels in the industry? I mean, countries like Vietnam, Bangladesh, even Pakistan has got $10 billion of textile exports. How do you change that?
One has to recognize that this is a 3-decade-old challenge. Now, there are many industry inputs on which the flow of raw material was blocked in the UPA era. Blocked how? They were making raw material uncompetitive. If you remember the announcement by the finance minister in the last budget, she announced revocation of the dumping duty on PTA, which is a base raw material for man-made fiber and fabric and material, which is the polyester clothes that are worn across the world. Similarly, we have in our ministry now requested the finance ministry to look at viscose. We are also looking at acrylic, which is again a base needed for fabric, and in fact 80% of those units are in Punjab. Now, these are the legacy challenges that the UPA had left for our country. Additionally, and I have said this many a times on many a fora, 60% and more, and out of 44 schemes in the UPA era in the last 5 years of their regime, 40 schemes were surrendered with their entire budget and not applied for the sector. Now, if you imagine a sector where 60 to 70% of your schemes are surrendered and there is no application of any revenue from the government, can you imagine that that particular segment of industry would flourish? I have always said this, that in the year 2004, when the UPA came into power, one of the first things they did was to dissolve the statistics division of the Textiles Commissioner Office. And when I received the responsibility for this ministry, my first question was that in the absence of data, how could you make policy for this industry? So we in the Modi government actually reinstated that capacity of the Textile Commissioner's Office, because in the absence of data, which segment of industry needs what help for what kind of growth, I don't know how aimlessly the UPA regime was trying to service this particular industry. But given the challenges of 3 decades, and especially the damage that the UPA regime did to the industry, our efforts in the past 4 years, and like I said, the PPE story shows the resolve of the industry if they have a supportive government at the center.
Right. Okay. From textiles, let's talk a little bit about the politics part. if you rewind to last year, Amethi Lok Sabha result was probably the most exciting contest of the election. I remember, this was not a three-week campaign for you, right? This was like a 5-year campaign for you. You went back in 2014 and continued there till 2019. If you can explain what did you do in those 5 years? How did you change the perception, and how did you, get in touch with the people? That would be great.
It is a long story, but to cut it short, I think that the Congress way of doing politics is this. If they think that a female politician or activist is involved, and especially somebody as adamant as me, they intend to verbally assault you with sexual connotations. And why I'm saying this out loud is because they've never been called out for it. And I've said this time and again, especially with regards to right-wing female support base, or for that matter, those in the right wing who are very vocal and happen to be women. I actually, from day one of when I took office as HRD minister, knew that I had a target on my back. And the target was because I had the audacity to go to Amethi and not whimper and sit down and just passively fight an election. Yeah, I think that for the Congress coterie, the fact that I went from door to door asking for support for the Bharatiya Janata Party, the fact that I had the audacity to ask questions of the Gandhi family. To cut a long story short, I think asked about a journey which is from 2014 to 19. Every day had a challenge because I had a target on my back. And I say this often about right-wing female support base and those especially who are vocal from the right wing. I think the Congress culture of dealing with women such as myself is to assault us verbally with sexual connotation almost every second, third day. Is to reduce and caricaturize every issue and effort that we make. And I remember when I had the responsibility of HRD, day one, the attack had begun. Most of it is meant to emotionally and psychologically break you such that you never had the audacity to stand up and challenge them again. It is amply clear that they had a lot of support from certain quarters of the Lutyens zone. I think that what they were not prepared for was that I am extremely adamant once I set the goal. And apart from my being adamant in terms of setting the goal for ensuring a BJP victory, what they discounted was the dismayed Janta of Amethi. The fact that a woman who comes into a constituency and just in a 3-week campaign manages to get 3 lakh votes is something that stumped the Congress party. They were not used to public representatives have a continued engagement with citizens. And I think I am extremely humbled and extremely blessed that the people of Amethi chose to make me a part of their family. So this victory, and I had said it in 2019, was not only for Bharatiya Janata Party, but it was a citizens' revolt against the Gandhi family.
Right. One curiosity question. After you won, you tweeted, "कौन कहता है आसमान में सुराख नहीं हो सकता?" आपने वो tweet draft किया हुआ था पहले से या it was spontaneous?
I'll honestly tell you, Ashish, I was exhausted after my campaign in Amethi. I've given birth to 2 kids. I've raised 3. My kids were going through their examination processes, and every mother and father, for that matter, is extremely adamant that they are around at least during final exams. Now, I'm one of those crazy mothers who would preen over the child's shoulder to say, "Sab theek kar rahe ho, kya kar rahe ho?" So I had that pressure of not being there with my children when they needed me the most during final exams. I had not only campaigned in Amethi, but also campaigned for my fellow colleagues in other constituencies. And I still remember, and this is the first time I'm saying this anywhere, 5:30 in the morning, I got ready that day to go to the counting segments, wherever the tables were. Something just happened, and I said to myself, "Shruti, you're exhausted. You have done the best that you could. You know that you have a very fair chance at winning. if people have been kind and have appreciated your work, and you need to rest. And I remember 6:30 in the morning, I called up everybody who was at the counting centers to say, "Aap baithe, today is your day, and let me know how it goes." I think by 7 o'clock, I had my AirPod or whatever it's called, my lead in my ears. And I think from 7 in the morning till about 4:35 in the evening, I was not watching the Amethi count. And when Mr. Gandhi went public congratulating me, I remember my phone just continuously buzzing from every editor in the country. And I can say this, Arnab Goswami is literally screaming at me, "Come out and give us a bite." And I just didn't want to. And I remember I just sat there, and it was alone in that small room. And if you see my Amethi room, this is a fancy government house. It's a very, very small room. मतलब 200 square feet की जगह है जहाँ पे मैं रह रही थी. And the first thing that came to my mind was all those people who possibly had laughed at my audacity, and all those who cheered me. I think that tweet was for them.
Right.
कौन कहता है कि आसमान में सुराख नहीं हो सकता? But there was a continuous pressure to come out and celebrate, and I said no. And they said, "Why?" I said, "Because on every table, Congress men and women are demanding a recount." I said, "Let them recount it 7 times, 8 times, 10 times, let them get exhausted." And that is why, Ashish, if you remember, I was first seen at around 6 o'clock in the evening. And I walked up to the election commission's table. And I asked only one question, "Bhai sahab, kab tak ho jayega?" And they told me, "Abhi samay lagega." And I went back. Everybody told me, "Rahul Gandhi ne declare kar diya, aap kyun nahi declare kar rahe?" I said, "Kyunki ye chunav election commission declare karega."
Right.
So in that moment of jubilation, celebration, I am grateful that God gave me the patience to remember. And I think for me, the most emotional moment was when I got a call that you can come and take the certificate. And I said कि नहीं, जिन लोगों ने मेहनत की है वो certificate लेंगे. So the Karyakartas who had worked, they went and received the certificate of victory from the election commission. And I remember that was around 12:30 in the night. And at 1 o'clock I said, "Can I go and see my kids?" So I drove to Lucknow. So the next morning, while all hell had broken loose, I was sleeping because I needed to catch up on sleep. I think that between the declaration of my result and the jubilation that broke out after Rahul Gandhi's press conference, all I did on TV was to watch Narendra Bhai go to the central office and the amazing response of Karyakartas all over the country. So for me, that is what the day was like.
Great, great. Gary, you have some questions about social media use?
Yeah, absolutely. So, ma'am, on the topic of social media itself, continuing with that, I find your Instagram feed really interesting. In fact, I feel you embody a very different kind of a politician, and you have a direct connect to the masses, but also have no airs about being who you are. In fact, your last post reads, I'm currently under construction. Thank you for your patience." So I was just curious, how you are able to be that way while also holding public office.
I think that we are at a time in our democracy where, because of not only facets such as Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, people measure you for who you are. Anybody who is not intelligent enough to recognize that people in this country cannot be lied to, I think that is why you see that difference between my Twitter and Instagram persona. There have been times when my children have been asked कि तुम्हारी मम्मी का तुम करते होगे Instagram handle. मैंने कहा सही करती हूँ. To envisage a politician without a humane personality, good or bad, I think is not possible today. If we think that we have only this particular presentation of this strong or vocal politician, and people will not accept us for who we are as human beings, I think is not trusting your citizenry enough. So I'm happy that in a constitutional position, I have a constitutional statement to make, which can be carried, let's say, on Twitter. I'm happy that the individual that I am, who has a quirky sense of humor, who might want to reach out on issues through either my Insta story or my Insta post, is something that I have a medium to express myself on. And I'm happy that when I am in a conversational mode in a TV debate, though you don't see a lot of me being combative anymore at the 9 o'clock news, I can do that as well. And I think quintessentially that is what is unique to Indian women. That there are so many facets to our personalities as Indian women that just before you think that you know us completely, we show you a new avatar. So I'm just a quintessential Indian mother.
Right. That's fantastic. And, another facet of how you express yourself is the way you speak in the parliament.
Sorry, I think that 2-3 things have happened. There are times when people say, "अरे स्मृति ईरानी पहले इतना झगड़ती थी, अब क्यों नहीं झगड़ रही है?" And I'm of the opinion that when you are in a constitutional position, there is a dignity of the office that you need to maintain. So I think that it's incumbent upon us to be responsible, that I'm part of an establishment and it is my responsibility to uphold the dignity of the office that I'm a part of. So that is why there are many people who at times literally flood my timeline saying, "You used to be so combative and you would lash out at this and that." In a world where complex political, social, economic issues are also discussed on international platforms, you need to ensure that whatever you do in your current office does not reflect badly when you present your country's cause on an international platform. But as they say in Hindi, सोए हुए शेर की पूंछ पर कभी पैर नहीं रखते. I come with that disclaimer.
Right. So, another facet of how you express yourself is the way you're able to speak in the parliament. You're one of the most fiercely articulate voices in the country, I would say. Your speech, for example, taking on the leftists about Durga Mata was, truly amazing. I was just curious again, how do you prepare for these situations? And, if you're doing interviews where, as you mentioned, let's say the host is a lot more combative and stuff like that. Is there any kind of a preparation that goes into that? I mean, how do you prepare for something like that? Please pardon the interruption. Hope you've been enjoying the 50th episode of the Bharat Varta podcast. We were having some connectivity issues, and so Smritiji was kind enough to move to another place. I'll let you get back to the discussion now.
I think that as a politician, one of my endeavors has been, and I'm completing a decade in Indian politics in the Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha combined as an elected representative. I've always had the good fortune of preparing on issues which are legislative in nature, and I think that tradition of trying to learn more about a particular bill or a particular law has actually held me in good stead. And when I use the word tradition, that is a kind of organizational skill that I imbibed in myself in my journey in the Bharatiya Janata Party of over 2 decades. I don't know how many who are listening to us or watching us today know of Bal Apte ji. He was very insistent on, and I had the privilege of actually growing in the organization under his tutelage. And he again is somebody who would insist that you would read on a particular topic, and I would read not only on the pros of the topic but also the cons. If I'm preparing something, let's say for a debate or a presentation, I would presume certain questions that would be asked of me. And sometimes I would presume the most challenging of questions or the most difficult of circumstances that I would find myself in, and then still prep accordingly, especially if I have to make a presentation in Parliament. If you hear that speech of mine, you will find that I make references to criminal psychologists, I make references to medical procedures, and in fact, during that time, I had been in contact to learn more about criminal psychology, about medical procedures. Unfortunate thing to do, but it's something that I wanted to understand given the scenario that I had to present in Parliament. The fact that my presentation is always based on fact helps a lot.
Yeah.
When you are presenting the truth, it is not cumbersome. It's only when you build a lie that it becomes a struggle. The truth flows seamlessly and effortlessly. And I think that that particular speech impacted or in some way found resonance with crores of citizens in the country, because what I spoke is something that they could personally check in their own homes with regards to the curriculum. What I spoke on issues which, like I said, after I took advice and read up with criminal psychologists, is something that was upheld by many doctors who had heard the speech. And I have a habit of speaking with evidence in hand. So even if you see me outside Parliament in a debate on television, you will see that I present a case with evidence. And I think that that has been the very foundation of my political existence, that I would not speak the untruths to people, because as a professional who has come into politics after leaving a flourishing career, I was of the opinion that I'm here only because I don't want to be a run-of-the-mill politician. I want to state my case with evidence. I want to state a case which will better the prospects of my country, or for that matter, which will do best for the society at large. So given that that has been the mainstay of my politics of over 2 decades, this speech is just one such example of how I speak on issues that I believe in.
Right. I really believe that you were able to tap into that underlying sentiment, and irrespective of age, I found plenty of people. Like I found my aunt, sharing praise about that video. I found my cousins sharing praise about the video. It connected to people irrespective of age groups. I
But
feel
I
that
think that
it
when you
resonated.
speak from the heart, people know it.
Yeah.
And that is where the connect happens. People have looked
Right.
at politics as a very cut and dry subject, but we need to recognize that this is an institution that affects the lives of millions of our citizens. And those lives cannot be introspected upon, or for that matter, those lives cannot be spoken of only on numerical basis. So when I talk about issues about Amethi or education or textile for that matter, and Ashish, the whole interview began with PPE suits. If you remember in March, there was a concerted effort done by certain quarters in the Lutyens area. Why don't you dilute the standards of how PPE suits are made? And at that time, everybody in the ministry was extremely concerned. They said we are getting bad press, and there is a pressure on us to dilute kar do standard jaldi ban jaye. And I remember distinctly telling my officers that if you dilute the standards and somebody dies, are you okay with that death on your head? So the officer said no. I said, then carry on. They said, what about bad press? I said, doesn't matter. I'm Smriti Irani. I'm used to it. Carry on. So I think that if you put people first, it reflects in your speech, it reflects in the stand you take.
Right. You briefly mentioned your career before this. You came into politics from film and television, which is under acute focus right now for not the best of reasons. I was also wondering if you faced any challenges of not being able to fit in, of there being any kind of nepotism and so on. What
I
are
never
some of the
wanted to measure up to somebody's else understanding of the kind of person I should be. I'm very comfortable being who I am. And I was this audacious even when I was a nobody. So when I came to the television industry, I barely had any money. And And in my 2 decades in the media industry, I've not only been an actor, I've been a producer and an award-winning one, a writer, and I've also had work done in the direction department. Now, as somebody who has done so many facets of the media industry, there are 4-5 things that today are being spoken of that I never was confronted with. One, the nepotism issue. It was not a part of the television industry because the television audience decided only purely on the merit of the actor. Television is something which goes into homes every day, every hour, every minute. And the television audience does not have the capacity to entertain bad talent. So I was very happy that I am in a structure where the audience decides the audience is the Bhagwan and nobody else. Secondly, I worked on the basis of my own principles. There were certain things I would do, there were certain things I would not do. Which is what? I would not want to get into situations where I'm running around trees, or I have to do situations or acts which for me are uncomfortable physically as a woman. My industry supported that and I got work accordingly. The third is that I never went to any parties, but I still got work. I became the #1 actor in television, the highest paid actor in television, and I never went to any filmy function, never went to any parties. So I never understood why people presume that you have to do all this socializing to become an actor. I never did. And lastly, what is being now spoken of widely, the drug business of the television or the film industry. I have worked with over 10 producers. I have worked in over 30 projects, and I have never seen any of my team members, you may call it, who are a part of the acting team or the production team. I have never seen them consume anything illegal on set. But because I don't know anybody off set, and I never had, like I said, I was never party to lunches and dinners and parties, I have not seen that side. Now, there are many who might say that this, given the controversies right now, can you make such a claim? I can. Because this claim of mine has been consistent for 2 decades. But I also feel, and I've said this today in a newspaper interview, whatever is happening, only the agencies are privy to it. The rest is all speculation. So it is incumbent upon us not to make irresponsible statements. But yeah, I also believe that we are not part of a zamindari system where lower rung actors are to be handed out something and we have to be beholden to so-called gharanas in the industry. That has not been my case ever. I think the only person who makes and breaks an actor is the audience. Nobody else has that kind of power. And if they presume themselves to have that kind of power, you will see some of the biggest names, including production houses, who have crashed at the box office. Right. So that I think is the biggest certification that in the media business, especially the medium like television and film, audience is key.
Right. So you succeeded in multiple spheres of life. I would say, I mean, people would, average people would take multiple lifetimes to be as good an actor as you have been, as good a politician as you have been. You've seen success in multiple spheres, right? And there's been a lot of scrutiny about your rise to prominence, partly because of that, and partly also because you're also an accomplished woman, right? So what do you see as some specific challenges that you've had to overcome? For all the women who are listening to our podcast.
I think that one of our greatest challenges is when we imagine a challenge and get submerged in its intricacies. I never looked at life as a challenge. I always looked at it as a possibility. And I think that when you look at it as a possibility, as an opportunity, there is a positivity with which you deal with issues. I am not saying that it does not in some way hurt me. Like I said, as a part of this interview, that when there is a verbal assault of a sexual nature by congressmen and people, it does. I have kids, I have a family, they read. But does that in any way break my determination. It does not. In fact, it makes me more adamant. So I think that I am blessed, and as you rightly said, it is unusual for somebody who comes from very simple means, who has always been adamant about being principled, to make it in two fields which are not known to help give rise to women like me. But I think that I am blessed that I present that possibility to women across the country. That you can be, and at times I tell my family, "कि कुछ करना है." I said that recently to them. And they keep telling me, बहुत कर लिया, बहुत मत करो. So I think that what keeps me going is the fact that I want to do and learn something new. And I think that becomes the very basis of my life cycle, which includes ups and downs. So why should I only give a message or be a message for women? Why can't be a message for men as well? That achievement or excellence does not have a gender. That's a wall you build. So break it.
Right. You referenced your family more than a couple of times. I would love to understand, how they deal with your responsibilities and, of having to be available 24/7.
They don't.
Okay.
I significantly sit at the dinner table. And I think that is the best thing a family can do for you. Not give you too much of prominence when you succeed and not shun you when you fail.
Right. Keep you grounded, basically.
Oh yeah. They are more than happy to keep me grounded.
One question on the politics side, how do you what would you advise the people entering politics? A lot of the language of politics has changed last
Why
5
do
years,
they need
right?
advice, Ashish? I have never understood this question. Why would one citizen need advice on how to help the other citizen, or for that matter, how to reflect or add to policy or how to add to nation building? I am being very, very open about the fact I never asked anybody for advice.
Right.
क्या करना है, कैसे करना है? Everybody has some quality or the other that they can contribute. And I think today it is fairly comparatively easier as it was, let's say, 10 years or 15 years ago. Today you have mediums such as Bharat Varta, where people can at least explore possibility of socio-economic debate aspects or policy issues. So I think that people who want to genuinely contribute need not get advice from politicians. Because the very idea of having new blood in politics is not to repeat the old, but to get something fresh, a new idea, a new pathway, a new way of contributing to nation building. If everybody was to follow the same prototype, how would we be blessed with some fresh intervention? The only thing that possibly you need to decide for yourself as an individual is this. Do you want to come into politics to be an active electoral politician, or do you want to come into politics because you want to be building on some social issue? Because if you don't want to be a part of electoral politics, then you need not be a part of a political organization. You can be a part of a social organization that supports a political cause. So possibly that's the only question an individual need to ask themselves, because electoral politics also does not happen overnight. I am now speaking with a 2-decade experience.
Right. So one last question on the how you've dealt with the media all along, right? Now you mentioned Bharat Varta.
Should be how the media dealt with me. I don't deal with anybody.
No, but there are many news platforms like ours. We are talking about Bharat Varta. There could be other channels also. What do you think about this trend? I know the institutional media has hounded politicians before, but what about? I mean, how do you think this will evolve now for the new media in the coming years?
I think that, if you're a politician, you cannot cry about the media imposition on you to get answers. You can't be a wilting flower. Oh God, the media has descended upon me. If you are so worried, then you should not be a part of politics. You have to have the capacity to take a thing or two on the chin. Because every day is not going to be a good day. And people in the right wing definitely know this. That there are going to be more bad days than good days. So I think that what helps now is the fact that we do not have a media which can spoon feed the audience whatever they deem fit. We today have mediums such as yours which can challenge a narrative if the narrative comes with a bias, if the narrative comes with a fake aspect to it, or for that matter, if a narrative is institutionalized to ensure that it endangers the right to free speech. Now, why am I a proud member of the right wing society or the right wing ideology? That we are not a herd of sheep or goat which says yes to everything that is being said. There are things that we challenge even within our own community. And that is what makes us distinctly, delightfully right wing. So I think that today, when you want to even have and I'm proud of it, that we agree to disagree even with each other. And I think the fact that we have that very basic foundation of dialogue, debate, and deliberation. If there is a segment of the media which is now celebrated as Lutyens media, I say bring it on. Why not? Let them get a taste of our medicine. No problem.
Right.
But it gives us an added sense of responsibility. That what we confronted as a bias is not a bias that we'd like to present just because we grow stronger as an ideology. I always tell people that we have been at the receiving end of some of the worst kind of articles, some of the worst kind of insinuations, worst kind of planted stories and news. While we have fought that, it is now extremely important that we, in positions of authority, in positions of power, ensure that we walk the right path. It is not easy, but it should be done because we are not the left wing, we are not Lutyens Delhi.
Right. So, ma'am, let's hear from you what you're optimistic about in the coming years for India, for the country, for the people. I think that would be a great note to end this conversation on.
We have a global pandemic that the entire global economy and society at large is dealing with. A pandemic that has slowed down economies the world over. A pandemic that has changed the kind of consumption we have seen in our market, domestic and international. A pandemic that has in some way fractured manufacturing processes, but a prime minister who brings hope. This is the first prime minister in office in India who's dealing with a global pandemic. This prime minister, when he spoke about Jan Dhan accounts 6 years ago, was mocked by the opposition. And in 6 years of the 40 crore accounts that have been established because of Jan Dhan Yojana today, in 20 crore accounts of women, 30,000 crore rupees has been given by this government. This is the first prime minister in office in our history who has announced 10% of the GDP for Atmanirbhar Bharat. This is the first prime minister in the history of our country who is ensuring free food grain for over 80 crore people in our country till the month of November. But as a woman, this is the first prime minister who speaks of women's issues, including menstrual hygiene, on Independence Day from the Red Fort. And it's under this prime minister that we will build a stronger, a healthier, a resilient nation.
Right. Thank you so much for your comments and your very candid views, which I'm sure I have spoken to you before, so I know that you're always candid, but good to see that continue one more time. Thank you so much for your time, Smriti ji.
Thank you for the conversation.
Yeah. Smriti ji, can you just take one picture?
Thank you for tuning in. This podcast was brought to you by the team at Bharat Varta. If you liked this podcast, then don't forget to share, subscribe, and rate us on your favorite platforms. We're available on Anchor, Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, Breaker, YouTube, and a host of other platforms. We started Bharat Varta to facilitate long-form discussions on politics, policy, and culture. We don't necessarily endorse anything that was said in this episode. If you do wish to offer us any feedback on the content or anything else, do reach out to us on social media or get in touch with us on our website, www.bharatvarta.in. The links are in the description below. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, stay safe, take care, and Jai Hind.